Today we have Felix in our midst who has agreed to give a lecture on the Spanish tradition. He has literally written a book about the Spanish student tradition, and he has agreed to give us a lecture about the tradition he knows so much about. So, Felix, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you a lot for counting with me. I'm going to try to do my best. First of all, we have to go through time. I am inviting you to travel across the time. We have to reset our brains. Man is willing to believe what he would like to be true, but not everything that is told is confirmed documentally as true facts. That's why I love this Francis Bacon expression. You have heard a lot about the supposed medieval origins of the Spanish tradition of Estudiantinas and Tunas, not the fish, but the university group. So I'm going to try to explain in the shortest period of time as possible the main differences between the allowed medieval origins and the reality. Even though some wrote in articles, in books, about the medieval origin, mainly on minstrels and troubadours. You must remind that troubadours and minstrels were the architects of medieval European lyrics. Minstrels arose in the 12th century, had lower education than troubadours and lower social position, and they sang the poetry and songs composed by troubadours in exchange of money, alms. They could be paid by noble people as any job, as any employment, or they could be singing on the streets of different towns for alms. Let's see how their music sound.
When I returned from seeing my lady, I feel no pain or suffering on my soul. God, it is only right that I love her without blame, with true love. Her beauty, her great sweetness of amorous flame, to remember night and day, seizes and inflames me. God, it is only right that I love her without blame, with true love.
Now you can see you can have in your memory the sounds of those compositions, lyrics of mainly about of the 12th century, because they disappeared in the 14th century. Those were minstrels, the one that we have heard already. But troubadours emerged in northern France and Italy by the end of the 11th century. In Spain, we have found troubadours between 1162 and 1213 in Aragon, the very first place in which they were found. And later, they were found in Leon and Catalonia, which are northern provinces. And later, in the 13th century, they were found in Castilla, Navarra, Castilla the Old, Castilla la Vieja, which is the area of Valladolid, Salamanca, and Navarra is close to the Cantabric Sea. They disappeared, both minstrels and troubadours, in the 14th century. Troubadours were noble people, so they did not were paid for their lyrics and songs. It was an offense. They were the ones that provided the oldest repertoire of known Latin medieval lyric poetry that has been musically documented. I'm gonna invite you to listen an example of troubadour music.
Pensamene e così d'uno chanzo faire, che le idee che sapedi che suffisa maire, e se o pugues a veni, en bus dis retraire, fa pugra saber, que eu plus fin joy esper, que nul nats de maire. Lucor el sen nell'albi, ahimè selveggiaire, e lei sunra e servì, dare slaveraire, con poese il mon ciausi, con un po' estraire, ni mon cor muove, c'amor me fai canteme, lei scalunam gaire. La fina vera valor, plus da otra valenza, el presel fresca colors, de plats e magenza, per as invagues amors, tanque m'entendenza, mironza feliz, plus ric joy que paradis, a grama parvenza. Nell'altra non pot ser cor, fanni la ghirenza, e un plus essendo doble, nei sovinenza, ma cendire ma sclamo, non la pertevenza, tan lissia clis, con plus vas messa furtis, ma il lamses faienza. Fora li benestan, sin desallegranza, tan caleo gesmuna fan, abdusa cuidanza, che li sui ser se engan, en una remembranza, dals mas confeses, tot çò cal mi duns plagués per a paumenança. Gates men vau meiran, non plena i pesanza, valella e soffremondan, a buona speranza, e doblerà monta, lanzave la semblanza, genti cor curtes, si preses de me merced, o calche pitanza.
It's very similar than the minstrel's music, but it has differences, small differences, and they use similar instruments also. You have also heard about the origin of the Spanish tunas, supposedly origins in the medieval Goliards. We must remember that Goliardism arose in Paris in the 12th century and reached other places, big cities, big university cities like Orleans, Cologne, Oxford, and Cambridge. They were tonsure students with lesser orders. Why? Because those orders has not the chastity vows. They love carnal love. So they were students because they wanted to enjoy the privilege called privilegium fori, which means that they were only tried by ecclesiastical courts, not by the king's court, ecclesiastical courts. And they did not want it to be priests, which would be a higher order, okay? And also in the Goliardism, we can find Bagman monks escaped from monasteries because they did not want to submit to the discipline demanded in those places. The Goliards, though, were also called Bagman clergymen, drunken and late-night clergymen, evil clergymen, or false clergymen. They combined their studies, the ones that were students, with a wandering life removed from the socially accepted canons as correct, frequenting brothels and taverns. They were all interested in carnal love and traveled from town to town, visiting tavern and brothels, seeing beans. Their main motto was carpe diem, to live every moment of your life as if it were the last one. Look at this. They are dancing here in a huge party. Look at this. The Goliard arrives to a home. The husband and the wife accepted him on their table. And then the Goliard sent the husband to the roof to pray while he went to bed with the lady. That was the life of medieval Goliards. And now let's try to know how their music sound.
Gratus et optatus, perquam noster animos fit lectificatus. Istum venum bonum, venum generosum, predit verum purealem probum animosum. de chiflus concavus de bonomero pro plus, si quis vivit sepius satur fite tebreus.
Istus venum bonum venum generosum, predit verum pure alem probum animosum.
Exum vossa regia, quibus polliatur, Jerusalem et regalis Babylon dictatur.
Istus venum bonum venum generosum, predit verum pure alem probum animosum.
Bacchus fortis superans pectora vinorum, in amorem concitat animos eorum.
Istus venum bonum venum generosum, predit verum pure alem probum animosum.
Bacchus ette visitans mulierum genus, facite subditas tibi tu Venus.
Istus venum bonum venum generosum, predit verum pure alem probum animosum.
Bacchus venas penetrans calida liquore, facite assigneas veneris ardore.
Istus venum bonum venum generosum, predit verum pure alem probum animosum.
Bacchus leniens, curas et dolores, confert iocum gaudia, risus et amores.
Istus venum bonum venum generosum, predit verum pure alem probum animosum.
Omnes tibi canimus maxima preconia, te laudantes merito tempora per omnia.
Istus venum bonum venum generosum, predit verum pure alem probum animosum. Istus venum bonum venum generosum, predit verum pure alem probum animosum. Istus venum bonum venum generosum, predit verum pure alem probum animosum.
And now we meet the last of the myths. The poor medieval students, they were also called spoonish students because since 1842 they adopted a spoon in their hats. I have not found any document relating those spoonish students prior to 1605 because they appeared that year. They appeared in the first edition of the first part of the Don Quixote de la Mancha from Miguel Cervantes Saavedra, that quotes those spoonish people. The very first image found up to now is the one I'm offering there, San Diego de Alcalá feeding poor people, which is an oil paint which was painted around 1646. Here, half of the 17th century. You cannot identify a person that could be a student. You can see here a lady, probably a widow with a small child, an old man, probably with a cane. San Diego, some orphans, more old people. This one could be a sick one around a big bowl of soup. They called it the silly soup because their main ingredient was bread, old bread in a bowl of kind of hot liquid. Okay, silly soup was delivered at the door of the convents. Okay, religious people, monks, used to offer at midday that soup to the poor people. It could be their only food for the day. In any of the short cases that we have found images, in any of them prior to the beginning of the 19th century appeared a student. Those myths have these main inconsistencies. They were not related to the academy, and all of them have lack of continuity with the 19th century Tunas and Estudiantinas. We can see it easier in this chronogram, okay? Spain, since the 8th century, was an Islamic country. And as long as the Christians were pushing them to the south of the peninsula, the Hispanic portion of the peninsula was bigger, up to 1492, when they took Granada and Al-Andalus, which was the Islamic country, then disappeared. And the Estudiantinas discontinuously, and then continuously after 1939. So lack of continuity. And now appears the 19th century carnival. Why? Remember that the French Revolution changed the world. Those illustration ideas and ideals reached Spain, and after the death of Ferdinand VII, Elizabeth II was a child, and her mother, Maria Cristina, governed Spain until she reached the majority of age. And Maria Cristina was very influenced by the French illustration. And she decided to make the carnival annual and without asking permission as before in the medieval time. So carnival appeared as an annual periodical moment of 3 days where people forgot their specific situation. Spain was a very poor country, and plenty of analphabet people. And in those 3 days of carnival, they got the enjoyment of the masks and fancy costume parties. They have a very different costumes in which they change their daily roles, and they believed that they were other people. The poor believed that they were rich people and use clothes that according to the rich people status. The males dressed like females, the non-students dressed like students, etc., etc. The change of roles is a very important part of the to understand the transition from Estudiantina to Tuna. I'm gonna show you a parade, even though it was filmed around 1924 or so. It gives you an idea of how the late years of the 19th century parades were. Okay, this is a parade recorded in Cadiz. Then you have a horse ride chariot with people dressed with fancy dresses, like clowns, painted with charcoal, like if they were from Africa. And then an Estudiantina de San Fernando, from San Fernando. They also, I'm bringing you this picture, even though it's also from the 1920s, to show you that women also were members of estudiantinas. Okay, more estudiantinas, people watching around by the sidewalks, and then we have to talk a bit of the different type of estudiantinas that appeared in the 19th century carnival. We have critical purpose estudiantinas, which were very rare. Mainly, they got out by carnival to criticize the politicians of the moment. Fun purpose estudiantinas, just to have fun and spend those 3 days laughing and going around. And the begging purpose, which are the real root of the actual Spanish tunas. Also, during Carnival, appear contests, estudiantinas and rondallas contests. Here you have a picture, 1905, of a estudiantina waiting in front of the jury's grandstand. This is supposed to be the jury. This is the grandstand. And these three round devices with a pole were called paletas. And they were all painted, and they used to have the text: first prize, second prize, third prize, with some kind of decoration. Another estudiantina in front of the jury's grandstand in a parade. They used to do the parade. They stop before the grandstand of the jury. They play there and they continue marching. How do they sound, or how they did play their music? It's a good sample. You can see, even though that music was not recorded by an estudiantina, it gives you a good idea of the sounds of the very late 19th century years. And a lot of Spanish estudiantina played it with their instruments, okay? They don't use wind instrument unless the flute, but they mainly use lute and guitars and tambourines to play it. So we can say that during the 19th century, we have the legacy that is written right there. The estudiantinas were characterized by raising funds, raising money to help charity organizations, hunger people, poor and helpless people, orphans, earthquake victims, shipwreck victims, sick and wounded soldiers. Spain during the 19th century had a war in the north part of Africa, and they sent money for that. During the 19th century, were the first national and international trips. And the image around here is a member of the Estudiantina Figaro, who was a non-academic organization, but it was very, very famous because, as any other academic estudiantinas of the 19th century, the Figaro group traveled through Europe. But they also, from Liverpool, departed to New York, arriving on January the 1st, 1880. In their first transatlantic trip, they did a second one in 1882 that took them firstly to USA, and then after 1884, they traveled to Mexico, and then all the way down up to the Patagonia, Chile, Peru, Chile, Venezuela, Bolivia, Argentina. A lot of years and a lot of concert and a lot of countries visited. They were the inspiration for the mandolin groups of USA. They were the inspiration for the estudiantinas in the whole Hispanic America. And even though they were not academic people, they left that legacy. During the 19th century, after 1878, they changed their scenes, the place where they perform, from the streets to the theater stages. Okay, one of the very first one to do that was the Estudiantina Española of Zabaleta, very famous because of their impact in 1878 carnivals in Paris, that was worldwide covered by the newspapers. And then this is the oldest, up to today, the oldest drawing of an academic estudiantina found and it was from Murcia, of the city where I studied medicine. It was the estudiantina of the Colegio de San Fulgencio, which was close to the cathedral, that in 1865 went through the streets of Murcia playing and asking money to help the victims of the Vibrio cholera epidemic that year. Okay. We also have this example. 1879, the Murcia's Estudiantina raising funds in Madrid to help the flood victims. During the night from the 14th to the 15th day of October of 1879, the Segura River got out of its way and killed more than 800 people, destroyed everything around their limits, and it's countless the number of horses and cows and any other kind of animals that were killed by the flood. Appeared a lot of estudiantinas asking money to help the victims. There were other causes like this 1898 pledging card of the Estudiantina of the Medicine School of Valencia to help the kids of the orphanage, okay? Inclusa orphanage. Also, the Estudiantina from the University of Barcelona went to Paris in 1898, not just only to have fun, but also they received money to help charity institutions of Paris. During Carnival, people also have fun with allegorical chariots, as we saw in the Cadiz silent movie. This is a postal card from charity, a horse-drawn allegorical chariot that was part of the parade in San Sebastian. San Sebastian is an important city of the northern Spain. We have also this example, also a horse-drawn chariot with an allegorical image that represents the Republican Spain. And this one, Salamanca's Estudiantina in a horse-drawn chariot. This is not frequent, but we have an example here. And this one, another Estudiantina in another horse-drawn chariot. And another one. These last two images are not from Spain, are from America. The actual is from Panama, and the previous one is from Chile. Remember, Figaro's legacy was the rising of local estudiantinas, and mainly they were Spanish people or sons of Spanish-born people that lived there and used to belong to what we call Spanish casinos. It's a kind of society in which they used to meet. This is the very famous Estudiantina Española that went to the Carnival of Paris in 1878. Look their dresses, look their instruments. A lot of violins, bandurrias, guitars, violins, tambourines, and flutes. This image is also a postcard that I'm very sure, because the direct and indirect information, that is the image of the Estudiantina Figaro in Biarritz. This picture was taken during their visit to Biarritz in 1890, though this picture has the Figaro after returning from their second Americas trip. They also went to Rome. Here, a drawing taken from a newspaper of the late years of the 19th century. I told you that they began to use theater stages after 1874. That's the Estudiantina Española playing in a theater of Madrid. And this is a drawing from the Figaro Estudiantina that was published prior to their very first trip to America. But there are also carnival female estudiantinas, like this one of my collection that was taken in Mallorca, one of the Balearic Islands. And they're begging to help poor people, to help charity institution, was so high that aristocrats use their image in their houses. Look this video of a demolished building. That's the typical Estudiantina image of the 19th century, okay? During Carnival, having fun. We get into the 20th century, and those years gave us a legacy. The mandatory link to the academy, the incorporation of women as equals, the musical enrichment, not only by using new instruments, but also by the enrichment of the repertory, the consolidation of international trips, consolidation of Tunas contest, not the Carnival Estudiantinas contest, and keeping the social prestige. It also was the period of time where musical records and movies appeared for the Tunas. When they performed for hospitalized patients, when they did a lot of collaborations in academic and socio-cultural activities, and very late, around 1970 and over, when the rookie stage phase appeared, they kept raising funds for charity. This is in Murcia, Cartagena, for poverty. This is Córdoba. We ask for the people that needs more, okay? This is the Córdoba's Veterinary Estudiantina. They also went to the streets to raise funds to help the victims of shipwrecks. Also, to raise funds to help the Spanish Red Cross. The Spanish Red Cross was founded in 1864. So it was not fully implemented until the very early years of the 20th century. That's why it was so important, the begging activity of the estudiantinas during the 19th century. Epidemics, earthquakes, shipwrecks, wars, and a lot of more things. This is the Cadiz Medicine School Estudiantina raising funds in early 20s of the 20th century to help to construct or to modify hospital facilities. But they also, later on, this is in the 50s, this is a tour that the Tuna of the University of Seville did through Andalusia and Extremadura to raise funds to help the poor students to pay their inscription in the university. These are hand publicity of my collections. These are other two ones in different theaters of Andalusia. But they also were present in social cultural activities like this moment around a monument. And we have this other example around a monument writer, but their impact was so high that after Jose Echegaray won the Nobel Prize of Literature in 1904, this estudiantina called Tuna Escolar Alegría from Madrid named the Nobel Prize winner as their honor president. This is silk diploma of my collection. The social prestige reached by the 30s of the 20th century was the cause of these mass receptions wherever they went to visit new towns. This is a reception of the Estudiantina from Madrid, the Central University of Madrid, in Córdoba, 1924, with their local students in mass went walking to the railroad station to receive them with their flags. This is the Córdoba Estudiantina visiting Barcelona. Here you can see it, the Estudiantina and the people around walking. And this is the Compostela's Estudiantina visiting also Barcelona. They used to do a parade. Sometimes they play their instruments while walking, sometimes not. This is a picture of the Tuna from the Central University of Madrid, 1924, visiting Córdoba with 4 ladies dressed with the 3-cornered hats and their capes. They were members of the Estudiantina then. The other members were behind them. This is the mayor of the city. And they received flowers that we were used to up to not far ago. The ladies were used to receive flowers whenever they had an important representation visit. They represented the Central University of Madrid, and they were received by the mayor of the city. This is another one from La Coruña, Estudiantina Escolar Coruñesa. In the center is Azucena Toriño, a lady that was part of the Estudiantina that she was studying then in School of Commerce. This is the last interesting picture after the Spanish War, who took place from 1936 to 1939. And I say that it's the last interesting picture because it's the Tuna from the Central University of Madrid in a parade with the man with the flag and the lady with the award won in that carnival, 1936 Madrid carnivals, first prize. The lady used long skirts, but they were also more participation of females in these kind of groups. This is the oldest female academic estudiantina image found, and is the one of the normal female school of La Laguna in Tenerife, Canary Islands, which existed from 1921 to 1929. They studied to be teachers, and they had a lot of activities to help to feed poor students, comedor escolar, and to put adequate clothes on those poor students, ropero escolar. This is a later image around late 50s. This is Tuna Hispanoamericana of Madrid playing their music in a hospital. They enjoy it a lot. Sick people likes it a lot. They kept during the 20th century their parades showing their emblems. This is the emblem of medicine. This is the Estudiantina or Tuna from the Madrid School of Medicine. Notice that some of them have masks covering their faces, the reminiscence of the very early years of those mid-19th century years where they used to go with the face covered. Anytime parades, they simply love to go from the train station to the city hall, through the streets, and this is Madrid Veterinary Estudiantina or Tuna, through the streets, and the people get massively in mass in the sidewalks to watch them go by, and while they were playing their instruments. This is other one. This is Cordoba's Tuna. This is these two images are from the SEU time, Sindicato de Estudiantes Universitario, which was university, Spanish university labor union, okay, that all the university students had to be linked to. And without joining to this labor union of university students, you couldn't study in Spain. And it was mandatory to belong to this union, join to the university Tuna or your specific faculty Tuna. This is the Tuna Hispanoamericana in Belgium. They also travel from Spain to northern countries of Europe. The same Tuna in Puerto Rico in 1961. The same Tuna in New York, 1962, I think is this picture. But there were, during the war, in the conquered part of Spain, conquered by the rebels, Franco, conquered part of Spain, mainly the Catholic schools had their own estudiantinas or tunas, and this is a female one in the northern of Spain. This image belongs to the Rafael Asensio collection. But you have more pre-universitary estudiantinas. This is in Melilla, north of Africa. More pre-universitary estudiantinas, dressed like the 19th century ones. In the center, probably their music teacher. This is an actual mixed males and females estudiantina. Actual, it still is having activity. Well, and university recognitions. Francisco Franco made it mandatory in 1939 that the estudiantinas, then named Tunas, the change of name from estudiantina to Tuna took around 50 years, from 1870 to the late 30s of the 20th century. Okay, so Franco made mandatory for estudiantinas to be named Tunas and to be linked to the academia. Without academia could not exist any Tuna or estudiantina. This picture is from my collection and is the Murcias Estudiantina in the Murcias University area. This is the Madrid Estudiantina with the consul of Portugal, this lady. They had a good, high, very high image. This is the flag of the veterinary tuna that we saw previously in the parade. And this is the other side of the flag. Franco made mandatory to have their faculty, university, or specific school logo in one side and their labor union of the university students on the other side with their emblem. This is the very first 45 RPM disc recorded by a female tuna. They forced them to call the group in that disc called the group Rondalla. But all of them were university students from the University of Barcelona. The next year, they recorded another disc, and in that one, the name Tuna appeared, female Tuna. This is the first male Tuna disc, 1958, also a 45 disc. These 3 discs belongs to the very first recording of the Barcelona's School of Medicine Tuna. And I show them because their impact in America was high enough to be responsible for the creation of the very first male estudiantina in America, which was the estudiantina of the Guanajuato's University in Mexico, April 13, 1963, 2 years after the very first and oldest University Estudiantina, which was the University of Puerto Rico, Tuna, that was created by Norma Urrutia and appeared for the very first time prior Christmas of 1961, and was formed by 8 males and 8 female students. And finishing this lecture, I want to show you how a Spanish tuna sounds like actually. And of course, it's my tuna. we are missing now the Costa Calidas contest, International Tunas contest, because of the pandemic problem. But we will return to it hopefully next year. And what this is showing us, acculturation. Okay? What is acculturation? A gradual adaptation of a group of people from one culture to another with which they are in continuous and direct contact. Okay? Estudiantinas of the 19th century were the roots for actual Tunas. They played what they call Tunas music, but that's a false consideration, because Tunas music is everything played by a tuna. It doesn't need to be a waltz. It doesn't need to be a paso doble. It can be anything. During the 19th century, they played classical music of this one, but they kept playing classical music during the 20th century and 21st centuries also. But as long as the Tunas group traveled, they found new musical rhythms and genres. They found new sounds from different unknown instruments, and they kept those sounds and those instruments for themselves. That's why the music is so rich, actually. Very important. Acculturation. So, this is the end. Thanks for attending. I'm very glad to be here with you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Felix. Someone noticed that that they didn't hear the last video perfectly, that the sound sometimes fell away. And they asked if there is a YouTube link of it somewhere.
Yes, I can offer it to you.
Perfect. Then everybody has it, and they can enjoy it every night before they go to bed.
I love that one because the supposed director went crazy. He got crazy, and we all were playing and laughing. I don't know if we laughed more than play good or play well, but we were out of control. Well, that's a great mess. There have been a lot of trials to create a national or an autonomic organization. All of them failed. Okay? The only one that worked were those years of Franco between 1939 and 1975, in which the labor union of Spanish students hold all of them in a single group. After Franco died and turning Spain to a democracy, we have had several intents to create federations. The problem is that nobody wants to work. As simple as that. Yeah. They used to be created, work for a while, and disappeared because nobody supports what the leaders of the group want to develop. It's kind of difficult. We have had also in America, different federations. And none of the actual federations, none of them, no matter if they are in Spain or in America, none of them gives you guarantees that they are composed only by academic groups. They are mixing academic groups with non-academic of different kinds, from churches, from city halls, what they call independent, which are a lot of them pseudo-professional groups. And that's one of the main problems of the actual Tunas in the world, because the joy of getting together with friends to have fun with music and some glasses of beer, for example, is leading actual people to forget that the tradition is an academic tradition, or at least it was an academic tradition since 1870 and up to 1975. And then after the CEU disappeared, SEU, the Labor Union of Spanish University Students, the reappeared false tunas or false estudiantinas. And some of them, I don't know, I don't want to quantify them, some of them for commercial purposes only. And that is a problem for a scourge, a problem, a big problem for our academic tradition. I'm very sad to recognize that.
Or maybe, this is a kind of different approach than Belgian students have, because the impact is not on organizing yourself, but on spending time together, earn some money by playing music, traveling and earning money, or gathering money for traveling, and the sense of organization is not that important for Tunas. I think that maybe the character of the bands is different, and maybe the national union is not that necessary for them to survive.
Yes, well, and the national union is not necessary if you have a strong group, okay. What Spanish Tuna tends to do since the last 20 years of the 20th century and over is what you are just saying. They are keeping themselves as live as possible. They're having problems with the recruitment of new students because of the highly competitive situation of the new students in the Spanish and worldwide universities, and they are surviving thanks to the international Tunas contests, for which they used to do rehearsals and to travel, and they also use, as they have no monetary help from the university since 1990s, they used to do activities to get money to be able to pay the gasoline or the bus tickets or the airfare tickets or their recordings. Okay, and we are resisting. We are fighting to the absolute absence of monetary help from the academic institutions. They accept us. They are proud when we go to their academic meetings invited by them, but they give us no help during the SEU time, SEU, the labor union of Spanish university students. The SEU was the one that paid for the uniforms, and whenever you finished as a member of an active member of the Tuna, you had to return the uniform.
But it was totally broken. How can you return your uniform if you were traveling in it and you were using it? It doesn't make sense.
I have not an example of that situation, but I have found press announcements menacing students in those SEU times that if they didn't went to the rehearsal session of whatever day, they had to be where they stated, giving back the uniform, and they were considered out of the Tuna. So, Franco was a dictator, and those manners were transferred to the SEU high levels. And we, in the Tuna, I knew since 1979 when I got into the Tuna of the School of Medicine of Murcia, was a group made of mainly of medicine students, and each one of them paid for their uniforms, paid for their instruments, and paid for their tickets. If the Tuna, in any cases, would have no money to pay for those tickets. When I was the president of my Tuna in 1988, we bought a huge lute. We didn't have a bass guitar, and we bought a huge lute, and was one of the very few times that I remember that the Tuna bought a musical instrument. And we don't use to buy instrument because if you get loose and you have no control of whatever you drink, that instrument bought by everyone could be lost or broken. So I think it's not that not only happens in Murcia, but in many places. But I also know a case in Chile where the Tuna was called to the rectors, the main charge in Hispanic universities, the more than the dean, and they were called. They went to the office. Okay, I have heard that you were drunken and this and this and this and this. So give me your becas, and the Tuna is canceled. So that's good, because if you're showing the emblem of your faculty or your university, you must show an adequate behavior.
Yeah, but my question also is like, like I'm from Czapka in Poland, and we a lot of have like, this is a kind of dirty czapka because it has a lot of pins and so on and so on, and it's not seen good. We are also considered as drinking a little bit too much and not really doing anything productive maybe, but still I think that nobody would deny us like place in the university, because I don't know, this is something associated with the university.
Well, I don't used to talk about the uniforms. During the 19th century, it was a prestige to seem like the Spanish students, medieval Spanish students, with a very broken uniform, or a very broken and tiered cap.
Yeah.
The tuna that I knew in the late 70s was not that tuna, even though some people, mainly because because of their economical situation, didn't change some changeable parts of their uniforms. Becas with wine stinks, or tiered handcuffs or whatever. There were a few, not many. I don't care. What is important is to keep the tradition. What is important is not the envelope, but the person that is sharing their knowledges and their experiences to new people that is coming to the group. And that's why I am so so defender of the academic tradition, because if they're nowhere, SEU, SEU, the labor union of Spanish students, there were no Spanish Tunas today, because all of them disappeared during the Spanish Civil War. And Spain was destroyed when the war ended during 1939. And the very first tuna that found in a historic newspaper of that year was the tuna from the University of Murcia. And I'm very proud of that. They were found, and the article says that they played music in an official act in Seville, and then in one of the radio stations of Seville. So copies are everywhere. There were copies during the 19th century, and copies reappeared after Francisco Franco's death, mainly. And they are an epidemic movement in America, actually. But we can do nothing but trying to keep our legacy, to try to keep in our group, to be aware of the huge and very important thing that is to keep the group linked to the academy, and to try to avoid the external temptations, like turning to professionals. We are not professional musicians. We are students. I'm at 64, I'm still studying. And that's good. That's the academic spirit.
One more question. How about young people? Because I am aware that maybe Tuna members are more associated with some people who remember better times, and maybe the younger people are more left wing, so much that they don't want to have anything to do with Tunas. Is this only my impression, or how do you think? How is it in Spain or in America?
Well, that was the main reason why the mid-19th century Tunas and Estudiantinas were so well received by the Spanish public, because those groups recalled the ancient students.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And in those times, Estudiantina did not mean a group of students. Estudiantina, during the 19th century and very late years of the 19th century, the meaning was any kind of group that went to the streets to beg, to ask for money, because they, not mostly, but that was an activity linked to the poor student, which that begging activity was allowed. So 19th century estudiantinas were well received because the Middle Age ended less than a century from those years, and their collective memory had those images in their minds. After that, because of their begging for poor people, charity organizations, helping victims of any kinds, their image rose so high that politicians wanted to appear with Estudiantinas and Tuna in newspapers and pictures. Okay? And that was kept until the Spanish Civil War, 1936. With Franco, 1939, 1975, that was the cause, also the cause of the high impact of Tunas in the university students, because it reminded good times. Remember that Spain lost his empire in 1894 and 98 when they lost Cuba and Philippines and sold Puerto Rico in the Treaty of Paris. So they had a huge nostalgic feeling, and the Estudiantina remind those good times when people did good actions to help other people. Actually, probably the main enemy to keep capturing new members to enroll more members is the change of social values. The society, actual society, has changed so much in the last 30 years that there are almost no ethics. You can see that in politicians, in everywhere. Honesty is a value in decreasing also, and taking care of the most unlucky people, poor people, ruthless people, backbones. That's almost lost, and that's one cause. And the other cause for me is the high competition between students to get into the university. The entrance test to get in the university is so high, for example, that since 1995, The Economist published that in Madrid Complutense's medical school, the females were their number of ladies were higher than the numbers of men. So medicine has turned to a feminine study, like it was in previous years to be teacher, to be nurse. And that's why also the rising of female tunas since the 1980s, because there are more ladies in the university. But the number of male tunas is decreasing at the same time as the number of female tunas is increasing. I did a study a few years ago about that. And if the tendency doesn't change, we could be with any kind of tunas, university tunas in Spain around 2050 or so, because the increasing rate of the female tunas won't be enough to compensate the disappearance, the lowering of the male tunas. Academical competition, different changing of the changes in the social values, the situation of abandonment that the university that we feel from the university in the needed help. In other, no, we have a lot of help, moral help, animical help when they call us to academical acts. And they, for example, the dean of the School of Medicine of the University of Murcia is the actual honored person for the International Costa Cálidas Festival of Tunas. So they accept those charges. They also, the 3 or 4 deans prior to the actual one also accepted. So they feel the Tuna as their institution, but we need a bit more. Somebody to some place to rehearse. A bit, not much.
Thank you.
All right, there's some questions from our Bulgarian friend as well, and he doesn't have a microphone, so I'd like to read them up for you.
Okay.
First of all, his question is, what is the meaning of the word tuna? Because he did not probably understand the link with Mr. Franco. Why did he ask for a change of heart? What the name is concerned.
Okay, that's a matter for a new book, but I'm going to shorten it. Okay, during the mid-age, in a dialect named Germania, tuna was the name used by the collegiates. Collegiates were the students that lived in the university, the only ones with beca, okay? And they called students of the Tuna to the poor people that could not pay the studies of clean blood that were very expensive, by which an external paid person certified that Peter Wright, let's say, has no Jew, Muslim, or other religion, father, mother, grandfather, grandmother in 4 generations. So the very first use of the word tuna was a despective, pejorative adjective for those poor students. Okay. The word reappeared around 1870, coinciding in time with some new influences, external influences over the carnival. And I'm still studying. I cannot say everything what I know because it's going to be published in that book that I already mentioned that will be finished by 2023. But I can anticipate that those external factors changed the minds of the real students and decided not to be named Estudiantina as already and to name themselves Tuna. It took 50 years. That change took from the 1870s to the late 1930s. Okay, just to difference, to make a difference from the non-academic groups. But even though non-academic groups, some of them changed their names to Tuna, confusing even more the citizens that watched them during Carnival days. So it was a way to say, okay, we meet together during Carnival days. We both could beg to help some institutions, but we are not equal. You are not students. We are students. And that's why appeared the real change when they linked to their names the institution, the academic institution. Tuna of the School of Medicine, Tuna of the School of Law, Tuna of the University of... That could not be copied. And now we have found recently, in the last 10 years, few cases in America of non-academic tunas named themselves tunas and copying exactly the emblem of university tunas. So I've been talking about the change of values in our society, and that's one of the consequences. There's also a non-academic tuna, which, because he's professional in Colombia, named Tuna Real of, that try a few years ago, maybe 12 years ago, try to receive money from a Mexican Tuna Real of, because they patented the name Tuna Real. So the situation is turning crazy. And I'm not against any non-academic group. I'm just defending my family of academic groups because they taught me a lot of values that I'm trying to share in this crazy society of today with no values at all. I don't know if I have answered you.
Thanks for that answer. It's very complicated, but
You have to translate it to Polish.
it gives rise to reading the book that you're going to publish, because it's a very interesting interplay with all sorts of societal intricacies. He's got several other questions.
Yes, I'm ready.
As we've just touched on, well, the spin-off student culture in the Americas. Well, it's different, of course, but they still use Spain as an inspiration. How do you feel about that? Are you glad that
that's easier to explain. Okay, remember during the Spanish Empire, those countries of the American continent, let's say colonized, even though I don't like that word, by Spain, received not only the faith, but also the university. Spain founded a lot of universities along the Hispanic world in America. More recently, let's say mid 20th century, due to the common language, all those countries speak Spanish, okay? Even though some of them are keeping their native languages, like Quechua in Mexico or Mapuche in Chile, okay? They are keeping their native languages. They share Spanish with us, okay? And was very common to come to Spain to do postgraduate studies, okay? And in those late 50s and all 1970s years, a lot of people, let's say from Peru, from Mexico, from Colombia, came to Spain and knew what the tuna was. Another point, a lot of religious people, nuns, priests, that studied in Spain were transferred to those countries, and they knew the Tunas tradition. And in their high schools and other pre-university schools, they founded their child's estudiantinas and their children estudiantinas and their children's tunas. I found a few in Colombia, for example. So the soil was prepared for the university tuna. When it happened, simply, around the late years of 1950s, Norma Urrutia, teacher of Spanish literature of the University of Puerto Rico in Rio Piedras, was sent to Paris, invited by her university to see if she wanted to do the PhD degree in the Sorbonne University. And in those streets of Paris, she heard a sound that attracted them, that like the Mies to the Hamelin flute, and she went to know where that music came from, and it was a Spanish tuna, and she talked with them, and they explained her, and she liked it a lot, and they told her that the tuna were a university tradition, and she got that idea and took it to the president of the University of Puerto Rico. But the president told her that has no future. That idea had no future in Puerto Rico because they didn't have that tradition. She had to wait until 1960, 61, until the president changed, and the new president gave her permission to do the group. And she began putting posters in the dining room, the university's that dining room, inviting people, students. If you know how to play or to sing or want to know how to play an instrument, come to this place, this date, because we are going to create a tuna. And she told me it's on YouTube. I filmed all the question I gave her, the interview. She told me, Felix, appeared 8 ladies and 8 men. How come I would make a male tuna as the one I saw in Paris and reject those ladies that had a lot of interest? So that's why the very first and oldest continued activity university tuna in America is made of ladies and men. And the very first official act was in the University of Puerto Rico, in front of the main entrance of the theater of the university. I think it was on December 17, 1961. Later on, by a casualty. In Mexico, 1963, 2 years later, the University Group of Theater was trying to find music for what they have there in Guanajuato, which is recognized by UNESCO. How they call them? Entremeses Cervantino. Is related with Miguel de Cervantes Saavedra, the writer of El Quijote de la Mancha. Okay. And a friend of him from the theater group say, hey, why don't you come home? Because I have received a disc from Spain and I want to listen it with you. Okay, I'll go. I'll take with me a bottle of tequila. And the disc was the one I'm going to show you. .45 RPM with 4 songs. Okay. And they looked their outfit and that's why they founded that it's still called Estudiantina from the University of Guanajuato, to mean that they are students, because on those years a tuna in Mexico was a cactus. Okay. And they are keeping their name because they are proud of it, and that's great. And their first public official act was on April 13, 1963. And so, if the soil weren't already prepared, those two new groups wouldn't be able to keep on year after year after year. Even though the Puerto Rican president of the president of the Puerto Rico's university was wrong. As you will see, whenever the Inter-American University of Puerto Rico published my next book, they already have it about the history of the tuna in Puerto Rico. During the Spanish days, 19 and all this 19 then 19th century up to 1898, there were a lot more than 10, close to 20 groups with the Spanish Estudiantina tradition in Puerto Rico. And one of them with a very, very, very famous music composer of the island. So this is the great joy of research, because some good things are lost and people used to forget what they don't know. It's normal. That's why we have this commitment since we founded Tunemundi in 2012.
Right, thank you for this interesting story once more. Our Bulgarian friend wants me to repeat that another time in his name, so thank you again for this explanation. He's got another sort of personal question. He asks you whether you can stay in the tuna if you have finished your studies, because well, in Bulgaria you can't stay within your student society. If you have to give up your studies, you have to leave.
No.
And okay.
Tuna is different here in Spain. Okay, we have documents since the 19th century that states, for example, Estudiantina Española, the one that went to the Paris Carnival of 1878, was formed by pre-grade students. They haven't finished their university studies, and plus postgraduate students. And you have the list of their names and their studies in an article I wrote 5 or 10 years ago in our web. So actual Spanish tunas don't get you out of the tuna whenever you finish your studies. The main thing is to get into the tuna when you are studying. Okay? It doesn't matter if you get into the tuna when you are in pre-graduate studies or in postgraduate studies. You could enter the studying for a PhD. You are a student in the university. Okay? The main thing is to be studying when you enter and when you earn your distinctive. With your beca means that you are, how can I say it? It's the highest grade that you can have in our group. I don't know if in your countries you have different levels. Each member of a Spanish tuna that have this is not an aspirant. It's the general. You see how huge is the jump from one category to the other one. Is the and over him or her, the only difference is the ones that are composed, forming the direction committee or the directive committee, the president, the vice president, secretary and the one who takes care of the money. He often doesn't have any. And that's what we like, because be a member of a tuna gives you another value. We all are the same. We don't have general, colonel, captain, lieutenant, sergeant. No. When you get it, you're the same. We are all equals.
But before that, you have to pass something as an aspiring member, or
yeah, but it was not always that. Either that rookie phase appeared with in the 1980s, when Spain suffered a boom of tunas. A lot of tunas appeared, and the oldest tunas decided that to be considered an official tuna, you have to go through that phase, in which they were going to be observed, supervised by an official older tuna, just to try to keep the tradition unchanged. And that's recent, the 80s.
Okay, it's very interesting.
Yeah, and sometimes some people, depending of their capacity of learning the internal procedures and learning how to play, learning how to sing, which is important also, but not necessarily, and getting in touch with every people, because all the members with Becca are the ones that are going to vote if they deserve or not the Becca whenever it happens. So some people, it's very rare to earn the Becca in less than a year. What's more usual is to spend from 2 to 4 years, okay, to earn the Becca. It depends on a lot of factors. The time the aspirant dedicates to the tuna, the capacity of the aspirant to do rehearsals by his own, a lot of things.
All right, thank you. Thank you for your work as an academic, by heart and by intellect. Both are important, I think.
Thank you. Wow.
One more question from Bulgaria, and actually I find it a very good one. It's a very practical one. How do you practice and play during COVID? Because, well, you have to connect by computer, I guess, and that's not really so evident, especially now if you're trying to play the guitar or practice your instruments, sing along.
When I get into the tuna, I entered playing guitar. And when I earned my Becca was the last time that I played guitar, because I was tired of watching my tuna playing, for example, boleros without maracas, without bongos, without congas. Each genre, each rhythm claims for their natural musical instruments. That's acculturation, remember. And I cannot play a bolero with a tambourine. That's a criminal. Okay, you can change it. Can you play a Condor Pasa without a pan flute or an a Peruvian bombo drum. No.
Or just try to play the A-Team song with a ta-ta-tan.
So
Yeah.
we have to be consequent with what we do. Say, for example, music from Venezuela, joropo. There you have the Venezuelan cuatro to play it. It has a great sound. It is so enriching, so good to see how local initiatives makes things better in sometimes. So,
And do you fear that these things will get lost now because of COVID? Because you can't get together and play the music?
I'm afraid that after COVID epidemic period, a lot of Spanish tuna are gonna disappear. I'm afraid. Mainly because of they have had not possibilities to go to the university and capture new candidates to get into. And because of in those 2 years, hopefully, the elderly members of the tuna have lost their interest because of that lack of months, years without tuna's activities. They dedicated those months or years to other family or personal activities, and their values changed. So I wouldn't like to be right, but I think that we will see that this pandemic situation will be the cause of a lot of tunas that are gonna get inactive, to be kind with them. And it will happen around the world. Wherever there's a tuna, it will happen. It has the possibility to happen.
So part of your project right now, your research project, is trying to preserve the tuna tradition, but also the musical tradition that's associated.
No. My Tunemundis project is it has a few main motifs. Okay, you already know that the main, or one of the main logo, is the research. Okay, but after research, we have a few other. Let me find. Research, preserve, construct, share. Those are our 4 main motifs as an association. Okay. Research, because if you don't know what happened, you cannot share it. If you don't know it, you cannot preserve. And if you don't preserve, you cannot construct the future. So my research now is more to satisfy my curiosity, but I'm still going on with our association as Tunemundi. Those are their 4 main items in our association. We're a few. We are very, very, very numerically small amount of researchers, and it's bad to say, but people have a lot of ego, and it's very difficult to consolidate group of researchers because they don't always have the same interest for a single matter. They don't have all the same amount of time to dedicate to research. They don't have the same attitude to to reach final text of any lecture or article. And narcissism is also very high. And I understand that when you're young, but it is not of any interest of me at 64. So if anyone wants to join, here are my shoulders. You can count on me. For example, my last book, published book with Paul Rupa, Milwaukee, member of the Milwaukee Mandolin Orchestra, was a great experience. But he's also a person, a very generous person with no economical interest and no ego. And well, the world is very, very big, so it's possible that sometime could appear another Paul Rupa in my life. I've been sharing lectures, papers with professors of the University of Milwaukee, University of California, University of Puerto Rico. That's a joy. Some University of Peru, some University of Chile. That's a joy. And I need nothing more.
All right, thank you. Thank you for that answer. It's a beautiful answer.
Thank you. Well, it seems that time's going, and if there are no questions in respect for their own family times, and I'm not the conductor, we shall say bye-bye. Do you have any plans?
Can't go out, so
I'm going to finish up my abstract and going to add some references to it. It's going to be about hierarchy in in academic traditions compared to non-academic traditions and rituals and whatnot.
Well, firstly, we must know if there are some non-academic traditions that could compare with academic traditions. Because if there are no comparison possible, what's the interest? You know, I've been studying the Figaro. The Figaro. I've been said by an older and younger researcher that I am the most documented Figaro researcher in the world. I'm ashamed, but it could be real. And I studied it even though their members were not students. Why? Because the legacy, their high impact in our world. Okay, and I have had enough. I also study another non-academic estudiantina of the late 19th century that traveled to Australia, and I wrote another book. And I wrote that book while Paul Rupa was checking the last edition of our book of the Figaro to trip to America. But if I time and I have the energy and I have the interest and I found material, why not publishing it?
all right. I think that all the questions for now have been asked. I'm sure there will be more. Thank you very much for the interesting evening.
Same to you.
It's a real pleasure having you, and I'm sure we will stay in touch.
I really enjoyed this 2 hours. I don't know. I'm here. You know how to find me.
I do
And
now.
the Academy will join us in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, and have a nice evening,
Thanks.
everyone.
Same to you. Bye.
Bye.